Nestled in the heart of Jammu and Kashmir lies the picturesque town of Pahalgam. Known for its snow-capped peaks, pine-covered valleys, and warm hospitality, Pahalgam has long been a symbol of serenity. Tourists from across the country and around the world visit this peaceful town to soak in its beauty and escape the rush of modern life. But on April 22, 2025, this paradise witnessed a horrifying act of terror. On that tragic day, a tourist bus traveling near Pahalgam was targeted by terrorists in a brutal ambush. Explosives ripped through the vehicle, followed by gunfire that echoed through the valley. When the smoke cleared, 26 lives were lost, men, women, and children who had come seeking peace, joy, and beauty. In moments, families were torn apart. The attack sent shockwaves across India. News channels flashed grim headlines, politicians expressed grief, and ordinary citizens lit candles in solidarity. But beneath the sorrow, there was anger, deep and resolute. This wasn't the first time India had bled at the hands of terrorism. Since the partition of British India in 1947, India and Pakistan have had a strained relationship. The state of Jammu and Kashmir, particularly, has been the epicenter of this geopolitical tension. Wars in 1947, 1965, and 1971, the Kargil conflict in 1999, and multiple terrorist attacks, all trace back to the unresolved Kashmir issue and the cross-border infiltration that continues to this day. Over the years, India had responded with measured force. In 2016, India carried out surgical strikes after the Uri attack. In 2019, the Balakot airstrikes responded to the Pulwama suicide bombing. These operations were warnings that India would no longer stay silent. The 2025 Pahalgam attack, however, crossed another line. Intelligence agencies quickly traced the attack to the Resistance Front, a terror outfit with known ties to Pakistan-based handlers. Despite diplomatic denials by Islamabad, satellite images, intercepted communications, and financial trails painted a clearer picture. India's leadership convened in emergency meetings. The Prime Minister, the Defense Minister, chiefs of the Army, Navy, and Air Force, all met behind closed doors. The nation waited in anxious silence. On May 6, 2025, the decision was made. The operation would be swift, calculated, and limited, targeting only those behind the attacks. It was named Operation Sindhoor. The name symbolized both sacrifice and retaliation, a reminder of the blood spilled and the resolve to defend it. In the early hours of May 7, 2025, Operation Sindhoor was launched. The Indian Air Force deployed Rafale jets equipped with Scalp air-to-surface missiles. Land-based BrahMos cruise missiles were launched from strategic positions in Rajasthan and Punjab. The Indian Navy contributed with submarine-launched variants of the BrahMos, ensuring a three-pronged strike capability. Loitering munitions, or kamikaze drones, targeted smaller installations and vehicles on the move. 9 terror training camps and ammunition depots located in Bahawalpur, Moridke, Muzaffarabad, and Kotli were struck with pinpoint accuracy. Indian authorities ensured that the attacks occurred during early dawn hours to minimize collateral damage. Pakistan confirmed 31 civilian deaths and 57 injuries. India claimed that the targets were isolated from civilian zones and released satellite images showing the destruction of military-style compounds. The international response was swift but mixed. Some nations, including the United States, France, and Israel, supported India's right to defend itself. Others, including China and Turkey, called for restraint. The United Nations expressed deep concern and called for an immediate cessation of hostilities. But the conflict was far from over. On May 8, Pakistan retaliated. Artillery fire began along the line of control in Kupwara, Baramulla, Uri, and Aknor. Villages along the border were evacuated as both sides exchanged heavy shelling. In a dramatic escalation, airspace over northern India and eastern Pakistan was declared a no-fly zone. Over 100 aircraft from both nations, including India's Su-30 MCS, Rafales, and MiG-29s, and Pakistan's F-16s, JF-17s, and Mirage-3 jets, engaged in what became the largest aerial standoff in the region since the 1971 war. Dogfights erupted near Rajouri and Poonch. 1 Indian Sukhoi and 1 Pakistani JF-17 were confirmed lost, with pilots from both sides captured and later returned under international pressure. The skies weren't the only battlefield. For the first time in South Asia, drones became a central part of warfare. Armed UAVs targeted logistics routes, supply vehicles, and surveillance outposts. Both nations showcased their indigenous capabilities. India's Rustom and Tapas drones and Pakistan's Burak and Chopper 2 clashed in the air and on the ground. By May 9, the war had entered the digital realm. Cyber attacks on banking systems, government databases, and communication networks were reported in Delhi, Islamabad, Mumbai, Lahore, and Karachi. Disinformation campaigns flooded social media. Deepfakes, manipulated news, and propaganda pushed populations on both sides into panic and rage. That same day, Pakistan accused India of bombing religious sites, including the Gurdwara at Nankana Sahib. India strongly refuted these claims, releasing precise coordinates and intelligence proofs to show that no civilian or religious site was targeted. Neutral observers from the Red Cross and UN peacekeeping missions confirmed minimal damage beyond the intended military targets. On May 10, Pakistan launched a counter-operation named Bunyan al-Marsuz, a reference to the Quranic phrase for steadfast defense. Missile strikes reached deep